So hello, Mariano.
Hello.
Good to be here with you.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, so appreciate your openness to having a chat and recording that and kind of putting it out to the world.
Yeah, thanks, Lou. And I appreciate your invitation.
You bet. Yeah. So just where I'm coming from, I've been wanting to put out a little more content, and so this is a kind of a practice for me to do that. And so again, it's appreciate your willingness to kind of help me move in that direction. And you've seen that I had a YouTube channel, and you're like, hey, I want to kind of go in that direction too. So we talked about doing this together. Um,
Hmm.
we meet monthly. We met I think it was fall of 2024 at the Level One Internal Family Systems Institute's Level One training. We met at that training. I think it was about 40 participants and about, 10, 15 trainers. And we would be put into these small groups, and you and I ended up in a group together as four guys. And when that happened, I just sort of automatically felt a resonance with you. And so through the training, I would see you there. And then afterwards, we kind of connected. We said, hey, let's meet, let's talk shop, let's talk IFS, let's kind of stay connected with this. So since then, every month, pretty much every month, we meet and we chat. We do some practice IFS or talk what we're doing in our careers and came up with this idea of doing an interview. So a little bit of background on that. That's kind of how we got here today.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
the magic of Zoom because we're really geographically really right
Y-
far apart.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. You're in
so,
Argentina. I'm in Florida in the US. So geographically in different places. So yeah, for those that don't know, I'm a therapist. I did a midlife career change and went back to school for social work. And so been doing that and really quickly gravitated to IFS. And so I also have a background in 12-step programs, specifically adult children of alcoholics, dysfunctional families. And so there's a tradition kind of within 12 steps of sharing your story and putting yourself out there a bit. So some therapists and probably in the psychodynamic sort of perspective, you never put anything out there about yourself, right? But that's not how I do it. I kind of put stuff out there. I never bring my issues to my clients. I have my other resources, but if I can kind of put myself out there and let people kind of know who I am and be a little bit more human, that's kind of where I come from. And I think you're in a place of sort of exploring that too. Does that sound right to you?
yeah, absolutely. Um, I'm trying this on like the open space of social media, and that's new to me, and I'm happy to be, welcomed. You have your own trajectory. You have your channel up and running, which is exciting. I saw your video and I loved it. Like the first one where you share your story. So
Mhm.
yeah, I uh
Yeah.
I also feel inclined to like do the same and just kind of be vulnerable and open to the extent that, feels good today. And
Hmm.
it seems like an adventure.
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds good. So, you gave me a little bit of an overview of things you might want to talk about, but really just sort
Mhm.
of kind of giving an overview of your journey. I sort of think of you as a fellow traveler, a seeker maybe, or someone on a path, a healing or spiritual path. And we're both healers professionally. But yeah, sort of, how did you get here today is sort of like the question. So, I'll just turn it over to you and maybe start wherever you want to start about sort of what your journey has been to get to where you are today.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm not going to start at the beginning because I want to like put a little bit of context. I want to talk about trauma. I want to talk about spirituality. Because I think that these are things that people can relate to, really. I had a good life in general, in childhood, and adolescence, in the sense that I never was lacking for food or middle class. And I was born in Argentina. I was raised in the U.S. in Michigan. That's why, even though now I live in Argentina. I speak Spanish. My kids speak Spanish, but I have the Michigan accent, right? Because that's where I was
Hmm.
raised. I've been living here for a while, but yeah. And at the same time, even though having all these, like, I didn't have any of the adverse childhood experiences, right? My childhood was great, but there was moving involved and being an immigrant, of course. But lots of times I was wondering, like, why do I have trauma if my life has been so great thus
Hmm.
far? And that's what I want to go into a little bit, so I can share. Maybe it helps somebody, and that would be enough for me.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think that's great. And I appreciate you saying it. So a lot of, we talk about childhood trauma and there's like this big T trauma, and a lot of people don't relate to that word. They say, well, I wasn't beaten, or I wasn't abused, I wasn't starving. But we also maybe talk about the lower T trauma or the drip, drip, drip of trauma, or it comes in a lot of different flavors. Or we just talk about, not getting everything I needed as a kid. I mean, as humans, we're really wired for connection. And if our parents are distracted, they have their own issues going on, they may love us, but they just might not be available as kids in the way that we really need to have a sense of security growing up. So I really appreciate you highlighting that, we use the trauma word and a lot of people are like, I don't, that's not me. But my perspective is most kids come out of childhood with, some dents and scratches, just because that's kind of what a human childhood is. So, and I don't know that much about you, so I'm really curious, to sort of hear a little bit more about your story.
Yeah, yeah, it's just like you said. And for instance, it took me a long time to start reading and learning about trauma precisely because of what you mentioned. It was like, that can't be me. It has to be something else. So I was seeking more along other lines, right? But maybe attachment, maybe other things that were like, well, let me see, maybe it could be this or that. Eventually, I started reading Gabor Mate and the big T and the little T and the body keeps the score, also another um influence and yeah, I was led to IFS, but yeah, now I can go back to the beginning.
Mm.
Um, I was born here in Argentina, and I had a really really happy normal childhood, I guess you could say, whatever whatever normal means. But anyway, at age 4, my father he got a job in Detroit, auto industry in the 90s. Chevy was huge, GM, and lots of other immigrants from my own country and from all over the world got jobs there. And so yeah, I had to learn a new language and you know say goodbye to my grandparents and just basically the life of an yeah, first generation immigrant. So for me, I do have like a 6 month period where I don't have any memories. That's the truth. It's
Mhm.
like a blank, and that's pretty much the time where I learned English. My mom, I've seen these videos. I learned the language, and my brother as well, like really quickly. And all of a sudden, I had like the perfect accent. And I think all children at that age, like they're sponges. They pick up on everything.
Hmm.
So in like no time, I had already adapted. I could read in English and Spanish when I was 5,
Wow.
and yeah, and it was just like I was like this perfectly adapted little kid, even though I have
Hmm.
that 6 month window of not remembering anything, which must have been traumatic and very difficult for me. But after that, it was like everything was fine. I
Right.
remember.
But that period is just a really an intense transition for anyone, but for a small child, that would be leaving the people that you know, leaving the world that you know, and going into a whole foreign sort of place.
Yeah, absolutely. And my mother thought that the best way to adapt and to kind of fit in was to, as much time as possible be in preschool and be with other children and stuff,
Mhm.
which perhaps for me was like attachment wise was like, no, I want to be at home with my mom, not with these strangers that speak in this other language. But matter the fact of the matter is, like, eventually I was reading and writing in both languages, and then I think I was offered to skip first grade. My mom was like, no, I don't think that would work out for him because I don't know, we're new here, whatever. My brother eventually 2 years later he did skip first grade, went straight to second
Hmm.
grade. And this is a whole other issue of neurodivergence that I guess I'm going to get into as well.
Hmm.
But yeah, like good childhood. I had friends. I got along well with most people, with teachers, in fact, and I learned and I had did well all around. And eventually, when I was 11, my family, we decided to move back so that both my parents could work
Hmm.
back home, even though the economy here isn't uh is yeah, it's not so spectacular and maybe not as comfortable as it was in the US. But my family's here. Both my parents could have pretty good jobs here. My mom could have
Hmm.
just lawyer in the States. Her degree here wouldn't hold up, and
Hmm.
they made a decision, and that was really hard for me. So that was
Hmm.
like a traumatic event I really recall perfectly. It was just really hard
Wow.
because I had to learn Spanish again. I had this accent that, I lost
Hmm.
my native Spanish accent all those years I was abroad.
Hmm.
So I had to, kind of tweak my Spanish accent again and
Sure.
learn words like every now and then. To this day, like words in English kind of seep into my Spanish,
Uh-huh.
a warning, and I kind of have to like figure that out. And at the time, that was hard. I was 11, and everything that is implied with adolescence and the neurodivergent part did start to. Of course, I didn't have that vocabulary at the time. I didn't know that was a
Sure.
thing. Nobody knew that was a thing.
Hmm.
I was, yeah, different than most of my friends, right? I wasn't, having a good time at school. I would get bored easily. I was having great grades without much effort, but at the same time, I was like creating trouble in the sense that I was so bored and I just didn't fit in. I was like, I want to go back to the state. I went into like a private school, kind of like very, very like narrow-minded conservative folk, and I made really
Hmm.
good friends. But at the same time, it was so different than being in a public school in the U.S. where, like, I don't know, I just felt like I fit in more. Right? It was. I
Hmm.
felt like I felt like I was in like Harry Potter.
Yeah.
The go with the tie, and it was
Yep.
just fun. Right? That was my school in Argentina. Um,
Yeah. And learning to navigate these different environments.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it was so strange for me, and there was no girls at the school, which is also strange for me, right? Because I was like used to like the co-ed.
Hmm.
So all these changes they came about, including plus the neurodivergence, and I was expected to adapt, right? And I did, and my brother did, and eventually my sister did, and nobody talked about how difficult that these life transitions could be, and that we just kind of went with the flow,
Hmm.
and everything was just normal. I guess I did have a more difficult adolescence than childhood. Childhood was just like seamless. It was beautiful, and the
Hmm.
uh, the adolescence, that transition was kind of like shaky and bumpy.
Hmm.
Eventually, I was, after I didn't like school, even though I had good grades and everything. I just thought I was wasting time, and then eventually I was like, well, after this, there's more school coming because you have to go to
Hmm.
university, right? And you
Yeah.
have to pick something that you're going to be good at and that you have to work your entire life, you know, in,
Hmm.
and you got to pick something that you can be as successful as possible in. So I wasn't like, I wanted to be a musician really, but I wasn't given that encouragement to kind of like follow your dreams. It was more
Hmm.
like, you know, you're a big boy now. You gotta you gotta man up and just face the music and just do, you know, your duty is to be successful so you can feed your family or whatever, right?
Hmm.
In
Yep.
whatever career you should so choose, right?
Yeah. And you need
Uh,
to figure out how you're going to do that.
yeah, and there was this also other component that at the time was like, I didn't have the vocabulary or the words for calling it neurodivergence, but it was like you have these gifts in the sense that you're. I remember Goodwill Hunting, the movie, right? I used to love
Hmm.
that movie. Came out at that time,
Hmm.
and there's a scene where there's Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, right? And Ben Affleck is like, most of us are killed to have what you have,
Yeah. I
and
remember that.
like, yeah, I know, I owe it to myself to find a job or whatever, be successful. So no, you don't. You owe it to us, right? And that's
Mm.
kind of how I felt at the time.
Oh.
And it was like I owe it to others that if I have this gift, I can't just be a musician and just play guitar all day. I have
Hmm.
to be some sort of rocket scientist and
Hmm.
just give back to the community and forget about what I want. It's more about
Hmm.
like, what's my duty, right?
Sounds like a huge weight.
Oh yeah,
Mm.
oh yeah, enormous. And I went into engineering with that kind of
Oh.
mentality, and I started getting panic attacks 3 months into the
Hmm.
in school year. So that
Hmm.
wasn't. It was difficult for me. I broke up with my girlfriend that I had been dating at the time. I had to start a university I didn't enjoy. In fact, I went into my engineering classes with sheet music. I would read music
Uh,
and be like, "Oh, this is what I really want to do," right? And my
Yeah.
classmates were like, "What are you doing? You know, why are you here with sheet music if you like that?" It's like, and then it's like at the same time, I would understand what the teacher was saying. So I was like, well, I get it. So I have spare time now. So I'm just reading my music. And it was ridiculous. And then I started getting panic attacks.
Yeah, I mean, also hearing that sort of disconnect between what's going on in your outside world, what's expected of you, what you're doing, and then your inside world has this whole other idea of kind of what ignites you and what fulfills you, and a disconnect with that. And like I have had panic attacks too, in college actually also, and they were terrifying, just like really scary, right? And it was around that same time I thought I was going to be a doctor, right? And I'm not sure what I want to do. Right. But sort of this disconnect of kind of who I'm supposed to be in the world. But, and like you were saying, you had all these transitions at age 11 and just kind of on your own, sort of, for me anyway, it was just kind of on my own in my own inner world. I didn't know I was so isolated with my whole emotional world and what was going on. But again, sort of this idea, the sheet music and stuff that like something inside of you, carrying that inside of you, but not matching what's happening out here. Is that,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like what you said about like not knowing I was so isolated because like now when I get clients that are kind of like going through that transition like into college,
Hmm.
I pick up on like this immense pressure that I have this notion that the clients don't even know is so immense. It's kind of like
Right.
some sort of, benevolent coping mechanism where it's like
Right.
we're not even aware of how big the burden is, right?
Yeah.
Until
Yep.
much later. Now in retrospect, I'm like, wow, that is way too much for an 18
Yeah.
year old to carry, just way too much. And I was
Yeah.
carrying that and several other things on top of that. So it's like,
Yeah.
wow. I think back on my 18-year-old self and I'm like, whoa, I just want to give
Um,
that guy a big, big hug and
yeah.
be like, you know what? You deserve a vacation. Just let's go take a break and play guitar.
Yep. And at the time, it's just what's normal. It's just kind of, you don't have a reference point for how big it is. It's just what is, right? You're just kind of doing your best to get through it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it's just sending so much compassion to myself and
Mhm.
to the world that is just under this tremendous burden. Because yeah, you need to make money, and sometimes making money is such a challenge. So yeah, um, and that's when I started getting the panic attacks, and of course, I didn't know what that was. Nobody knew what that was, and that's when I was sought help. And I guess I was even because I'm going to say some things about the medicalized, psychiatric system and the DSM that are
Yep.
not that I don't see eye to eye with
Hmm.
those institutions. And at the same time, I was one of the lucky ones because I did find help. Maybe it wasn't perfect, maybe it has lots of shortcomings, but I did find help through psychiatry and psychologists. And I have
Yeah.
friends that went through similar things that weren't so lucky, and
Hmm.
maybe got the wrong professional, or maybe they didn't even seek help, and we're just like, we all have to deal with this, just
Hmm.
pull yourself up by your own bootstraps or whatever. And um,
So as imperfect as it was, you found something, resources
yes,
that helped
absolutely,
you. Yeah.
absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely. So at the time, it really helped me, even though I did see lots of professionals, therapists, psychiatrists. I received a ton of different diagnoses depending on the professional, on the therapist. And
Sure.
so one day it was, generalized anxiety, and then another day it was bipolar, and even this one time, this one professional said schizophrenia, right?
Hmm.
And that was enormous because I wasn't ready for any of those labels, and
Yeah, it can be
um,
scary. These.
it can be scary. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Hmm.
Um, Plus, those labels are supposed to like be like, this is who you are, because like in the case of schizophrenia or psychosis or bipolar disorder, these are like things that you're not gonna one day not be bipolar. You're gonna This is you, period.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Whereas like, I don't know, anxiety, or like, you can heal from it, and one day you're not going to be anxious. But in the case of bipolar, oh, yep, you're going to be bipolar no matter what. And
Yeah. And this
I
is
think
who you are.
scary. Yeah, this is who you are. This defines you. And
Yeah.
it was really scary for me at the time. So yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. And also
Um,
during the time too, this was also the time period which I relate to, have again similar experiences, the medicalization of sort of what was happening. And, for me I did get on, antidepressant Zoloft at the time. And the message was you have a chemical imbalance and you just need to take these. This is who you are. You have a chemical imbalance, just like a diabetic would take insulin. You just sort of take these things and this is who you are, basically.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. That was very similar to what I experienced.
Mhm.
Fortunately for me, um, and this is not something I'm encouraging anybody to do, but I didn't do what lots of the psychiatrists told me to do, and I was just
Mhm.
like, this can't be. So I
Mhm.
told them that I was taking the medication. I told them that I was doing this or that, and
Mhm.
eventually I sought help elsewhere, and I found a new professional, and eventually I landed with somebody who was saying like, forget about what they told you. We're going to do something
Yeah.
different. We're
Mhm.
slow, wean you off of that those pills that you're taking. We're going to try
Mhm.
something else. And that was where I say I got lucky, even though there was things I would change about that experience as well. But I found
Sure.
somebody who was like, you're not crazy.
Mhm.
You different. You're just different.
Mhm. You're
And
just wired differently. You're a different person.
wired differently. And he didn't use the word neurodivergent, but he kind of was like leaning in that direction.
Mhm.
So it was the first person that told me you're not crazy, you
Yeah,
know,
non-pathologizing.
non-pathologizing, or at
Yeah.
least not in that sense. Because eventually
Okay.
then we started going into like attachment, and it was better because, you know, bipolar or all those other labels, they weren't helping. At the same time, they were still better than maybe the labels that my teachers at school would give me, which is like um rebellious or defiant or like
Mhm.
ungrateful or lazy. So I
Mhm.
didn't like those labels, right? But then this was
Really critical labels,
really
right?
critical, right? It's
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, you're not conforming to the norm, then you must be
Mhm.
like just a rebel without a cause.
Mhm.
So
Oppositional
yes,
defiant. Yeah.
opposite of defiant, yeah. That's the one that they didn't give me, but I was yeah.
Mm. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, eventually it was like attachment. You are the way you are because of your attachment. And that was
Mhm.
just another like covert way of, maybe a little more subtle, not as strong, softer, but of saying, pathologizing as well.
Mhm.
Um, so I got into that. I started reading about attachment, and eventually I kind of traded one thing for the other. And one day, and this was pretty much about the time where I graduated as a therapist. And here in Argentina, when you graduate your 5 years of school or six, you get your license the next day and you're good to go, which is kind of
Mm.
odd, but that's just the way it works here. Eventually, what
Okay.
happens is what people do is they take more courses, they get more education, they get practice that way.
Mhm. Mhm.
Not It's not like required, right? Not like in the
Mm.
States where you're required to do a certain amount of hours. I mean, eventually you do those amount of hours and you do
Right.
seek vision, but it's not like
Not like a
mandatory.
set registered internship or something like that.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Eventually people do it, but it's like you do it your own way.
Mhm.
So when I graduated, I decided I didn't like psychology precisely because of all the stuff I just mentioned, right? I'm like, it looks, you're trying to fix somebody, you're not like on the same level with that person, you're
Mhm.
not going to a place of compassion. And when I decided that, I'm like, what I'm going to do is I'm going to work as a, like psychologist in the work setting, like businesses and whatever, just,
Mhm.
and I decided to go to India and study meditation because I was always curious about that stuff. But at the time, like somebody invited me to a workshop, like art of living workshop. So I kind
Mhm.
of, wow, what's this? And I was a big fan of the Beatles already, and
Mhm.
had gone to India, and they had learned meditation there, and I was aware of that. Oh, and at the
Mhm.
time also, right after college or during college, I was invited to psychedelic ceremonies, right?
Mhm.
So mushrooms at this one point, and also like shamanistic ayahuasca and
Mhm.
sort. And wow, that just blew my mind. And so I
Mhm.
had a hunch that there was another way of seeing life and another way of seeing like therapy. And these psychedelics, they just totally pushed me in that direction. It's like that hunch is
Mhm.
spot. We are all part of the same like ground of being that's like infinitely
Mhm.
passionate. And here's your
Mhm.
very small taste of it, and
Mm-hmm.
and that just opened up my mind. And I had
Mm-hmm.
read Aldous Huxley, The Doors of Perception. So
Mm-hmm.
when I read that, I think I was like 18 or 17, and I was like, this is never going to happen to me because where am I going to find, um,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then when maybe it was
Right.
when I was like 22, 23, I got invited to this San Pedro ceremony, and that really opened up my eyes and opened up my heart. And it was like,
Mm-hmm.
why was I not taught this in college?
Mm-hmm.
Why are we not
Mm-hmm.
talking about this in university?
Mm-hmm.
So I decided, well, maybe I'm not fit to be a psychologist. And where can I
Mm-hmm.
find this amazing knowledge in India? And that reminds me of Be Here Now, the book by Ramdas.
Mm-hmm.
He met this guy in India because he was Harvard psychologist, and I had read that book, so I'm like, I want to do the same thing
Mm-hmm.
as
Mm-hmm.
did. So I saved up for 2 years when I was working in the family business, which was an HR consulting firm. So I worked in HR.
Mm-hmm.
I liked it in the sense that I got to meet people, I got to do some cool stuff. I got to, I was even into like team building activities and working with middle management to kind of
Mm-hmm.
train them for leadership skills and stuff. And I saved up for 2 years. So for 2 years, I didn't spend on anything. I lived a very
Mm-hmm.
full existence, with my only goal of spending 6 months in India back then.
Mm-hmm. I'm really feeling a sense of connection or direction with this and commitment to it, clearly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I
Mm-hmm.
was like on board and fascinated
Mm-hmm.
by spirituality. Um,
Yeah.
and like I was just feeling so much better. Those panic attacks eventually, I mean, I didn't have panic attacks. I started healing. I started feeling better, even though I wasn't like regulated. I didn't have vocabulary for that at the time. I
Mm-hmm.
was still very tense, but I was functional. I
Mm-hmm.
still had lots of good things in my life. I was enjoying myself more. It wasn't like that time of extreme anxiety where I would have
Mm-hmm.
several panic attacks a week.
Mm-hmm.
Some points I was feeling suicidal. Like I said,
Mm-hmm.
that that very painful period. But yeah,
Yeah.
it was where I was feeling suicidal, where I couldn't like
Mhm.
focus, where I had
Yep.
like mental fog, and that
Mm-hmm.
lasted my college years, maybe 2 years of that. That was just,
Mm-hmm.
I'm amazed that I could even get out of bed and go to college and get a degree in that state, but I did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and that's where all the trauma I'm talking about. It's like I didn't know it could be trauma because it's like I had such a great life until then. So how could it be
Mm-hmm.
trauma? Must be something wrong
Mm-hmm.
with my brain.
Something's wrong with me. Yeah.
Yeah, something's wrong with you. Of course, after that, now after the fact, I can explain that trauma. It took me lots of reading, lots of feeling, right?
Mm-hmm.
Eventually I was not in such a painful state. I was feeling more compassionate about myself.
Mm-hmm.
Expecting myself, when I was in college, I was like, I'm expecting to graduate, write 3 books, get a PhD by the time I'm like 28, and
Mm-hmm.
then I don't know, have a chair in I don't know, MIT or Harvard on philosophy and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Three, I was like
Mm-hmm.
setting these ridiculously impossible like milestones for myself, and that just
Mm-hmm.
any sense. And
Yeah, very
when
future oriented of where you're supposed to be at some point.
yeah, what I'm supposed to be, not what I want to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because like eventually, and I think the psychedelic experiences helped a lot. Eventually, I started really feeding into and feeling into what I wanted to do, not what I
Mm-hmm.
was supposed to do, or what I felt like so much shame if I did what I wanted to do, until like these very compassionate experiences with
Mm-hmm.
psychedelics showed up, and I started reading all
Mm-hmm.
these books, and I was like, hold on, there's like a whole other world where there's
Mm-hmm.
and there's love, and it's not like what I'm supposed to do. That's what led me
Mm-hmm.
to it,
Mm-hmm.
right.
Yeah, and just maybe even just to weave in a little bit of internal family systems, like I sort of relate. Maybe a part of me wanted the chair and this stuff. A part of me sort of was conditioned to want this, but we come to a place, psychedelics or life experience, whatever it is, where we start to open up maybe to other parts of us that might want something different. And we start to listen to that differently.
Yeah. It took me
Yeah.
a long time to be able to map out things in that way.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because even when I went
Yeah.
to India, I still didn't have that capacity to make space for like both things at the same time, right? Like
Right.
the part wants me to achieve and this high achiever and this other
Sure.
one like what about all this fascinating stuff like music?
Yep. Yep. And it feels very other or like which is true, like which is the right answer.
Exactly. I still wasn't caught in that other or at the time because
Yeah.
like what happened then is it kind of overtook the like going to India and finding this new world overtook the high achieving. It's not,
Mm-hmm.
oh, they're both parts of me. It was like, no, hold on, this
Right.
part's on the back burner now.
Yep.
And
Now
now I want
this
to
is
do
what's real, right? This is
this.
the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's how I experienced it. So I went to
Mm-hmm.
India. I met all these gurus and went to ashrams and had all these
Mm-hmm.
fascinating experiences, which was
Mm-hmm.
so amazing. Very fortunate.
Life-changing, probably.
Yeah, life changing. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's a privilege to go to India, and I really needed it because all my life I had been doing what I was supposed to do and just kind of
Mm-hmm.
like beat myself up when I couldn't do it. And for the first time in my whole life, I was like, I am going to do what I want to do. And what I want to
Mm-hmm.
do now is go to India and just backpack and meet people and have these
Mm-hmm.
incredible experiences. And that's what I did.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, amazing.
That was very compassionate because it
Mm-hmm.
was like, you're not a slave now. You actually have agency and you're free
Mm-hmm.
to choose. Right. And I chose.
Yeah.
And I'll
Mm-hmm.
never, that was beautiful. It's like a gift to myself, I guess.
Mm-hmm. A different reference point about how someone might live their life other than what you sort of were locked into before then.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then I came back and people were surprised that I went back to my job and I was happy to do so. I was like,
Mm.
yeah, went I backpacked, but I still want to work. I still want to make money.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I did for a while. And in my spare time and with the money I got from my job, I would, go to retreats and still do all these awesome, like spiritual
Mm-hmm.
experiences and ceremonies.
Mm-hmm.
And,
So kind of
and
able to keep different feet in different places, right? I sort
yeah,
of a foot in the spiritual and connection to India, but also a foot in sort of like, oh, the money earning and the sort of things that I have to do.
yeah. And
Yeah.
the money wasn't more like it wasn't like high achieving. It was simply like, well, I mean, I have to make money somehow. And it's like if I
Mm-hmm.
could, it's some other way, but this is the way I
Yeah.
have, right? So
Got to eat.
gotta eat. It was practical, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And eventually what happened is in I started like moving in more like extreme circles in the spiritual community
Mm-hmm.
because I'm so fascinated by it, right? And I started participating in like tantric rituals, and people when I say that usually think like orgies and naked people, right? But
Right.
what it meant was also maybe with psychedelics or substances,
Mm-hmm.
just getting into this altered state
Mm-hmm.
and putting myself in like an extremely emotionally altered circumstance, which would
Mm-hmm.
be smoke a lot of pot and then like practice breathing exercises until you just completely lose your mind, right? Which is
Mm-hmm.
re-traumatizing because now I have the vocabulary to describe that, but at the time I did not.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, the people I did this with was like, well, this is what this
This is a
um
spiritual journey, probably, right?
journey, and
Yeah.
people in India do it like this, and it's like this very exclusive, like left-handed tantra sect does this, and this is like we're very privileged to be able to learn this, and blah blah. And then when I got
Teaching. Mm-hmm.
yeah teachings, and when I got like very activated, like sympathetic nervous system activation,
Mm-hmm.
and also anxiety and stuff, where they'd be like, "That's just your mind. See through it, and if you see through
Mm-hmm.
it, it'll go."
Transcend that. Mm-hmm.
And it did not go away. It's like, well, you just need
Mm-hmm.
practice. So yeah, at the time, I also didn't have an explanation for that, and I just stayed because it just seemed so cool, and eventually it did not seem that cool, and it was like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like part of me is saying this is fascinating, and another part is like, yeah, but you're not respecting your body, you're not listening to your body, you're
Mm-hmm.
betraying yourself on so many levels.
Mm-hmm.
So
So starting to parts of you questioning what was going on and is this a
yeah,
good fit? Mm-hmm.
right. And eventually I was like, yep, that's enough for me. It's like
Mm, mm-hmm.
I don't I don't care if this is supposedly if this supposedly means I'm dropping out of the path or I'm being mediocre, but I'm going back to look for more like not less extreme ways. And I went back to
Mm-hmm.
psychology, right? And
Mm-hmm.
at the time I found Kristen Neff, self-compassion. And yeah, from the perspective of my yoga buddies, that was like, oh my God, I can't believe you're
Selling
self-compassion.
out.
Yeah, like
Mm,
self-help, right? Like
mm-hmm.
self-help. You're reading a self-help book. Is that what you're doing? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh yeah, you're
Mm,
selling out and that's shameful, right? But at the time it just felt right.
mm,
And so glad I did that. And I
mm-hmm.
read Neff's book and it was beautiful. And I started practicing self-compassion. And I took a
Mm-hmm.
course on Kristen Neff's work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, that opened up something that I didn't have access to at the time.
Mm. Do you have a sense of what that is or what that was?
Self-compassion. Yeah. It
Yeah.
was the ability to stop torturing myself and
Wow.
to like really um open up to the parts of myself that were hurting and in a
Mm.
way
Mm.
that validated them.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Wow.
and I started well, I mean, I found one book that was maybe self-help-ish, and then I started was like, well, if this one is so wonderful, maybe there's more. Started reading all sorts
The
of
self-help journey, right?
yeah,
The book
yeah,
book collecting.
book collecting. Yeah. And I mean, it's a phase, it's okay. I'm not a fan of self-help per se. It was good. It really helped me. I went through all Brené Brown's books as
Mm-hmm.
well, several other authors. And I think like the point of all that was that it led me to what I eventually found is what brings you and me together,
Mm-hmm.
our work, which is IFS.
Mm-hmm.
And
Internal family systems.
yeah, internal family systems. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't looking for it, but I was in this online group that gathers around the work of Charles Eisenstein, which is also somebody that is a huge
Mm-hmm.
influence. I think is really amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And this one woman, she says, we're going to do witnessing circles. And I was like, yes, I've been needing a witnessing circle for so long. But it
Mm.
was not at all what I had imagined. It was like an
Mm-hmm.
IF circle group work. And
Interesting.
when and she said, I need a volunteer. And I was like, yeah, why not? I'll do it. So I volunteered.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, immediately. It was just like a 30-minute kind of like guided session. Immediately, I was like, wow, what's this? Give me more.
Mm-hmm.
And she
Mm-hmm.
was like, you should read No Bad Parts. And I did.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
devoured it maybe in a day or two. And I immediately said, this is it. And then I read
What
another book, Big Shorts, and then another.
what clicked with you with that? What is it that sort of is like, oh, this something what if it's
Yeah.
okay if you're open to sharing it, like in that moment, like in that 30 minutes or whatever, you said, oh, we kind of did this and something clicked, but like what happened?
Well, I can tell you
Yeah.
exactly what it is. And it's
Okay.
the self. The notion that
Uh,
Big Shorts uses the self
uh,
as an experience, not as a concept, but she was like, go back to yourself and that part of you, that inner critic or whatever, right? Can you send it compassion? It's like, yes. Oh, okay. No, I can't. Okay. So which part of you is getting in the way of that compassion? This other part that's saying that whatever it is saying, can you send that
yep.
part? Maybe I
Yep.
can send, and then I can send the other one compassion, and then I can do this. It's kind of, she was pointing me back into the self, which is basically what IFS is all about. And when I
Yes.
read the book, it was like he was like, yes, our natural state is the self, which I had read in a bazillion times in like the
Right.
Oriental literature, right? And in Vedanta.
Sure. Conceptually, you were hearing
Yeah,
about it.
conceptually. The difference is I had experienced it in this
Yeah.
30-minute thing, and then I
Mm,
like how to experience it through IFS, and I just
right.
kept experiencing it. And I'm not gonna say it's like this bliss state where it's like completely immersed in self, but at least a little bit. It's like a drop of self. But I knew exactly what it was. And for the first time, I was like, it's this. And I can, like, without a doubt, I know what it is. Whereas before, it was like this kind of vague concept of like, yeah, that's truly who we are with the self, but it's like
Right.
I wasn't able to feel it in the body in a very distinct
Hmm.
way. It was more like
Hmm.
imagine what it is based on some really nice experience I had either on a good day
Hmm.
I was at sunset or through ayahuasca or something like that. But
Hmm.
this time, like no, in your day-to-day life, it's like when you're taking your kid to school and it's like everything's a mess. Can you
Right.
send passion to
Right.
that self? Right?
And this idea that that's there all the time, right?
That's
It's not a
there all
place you have to
the time.
go to connect into. It's like if these parts, if we can separate from kind of these different perspectives or energies or feelings or thoughts and sort of lay, here's an inner critic here, or a part of me this, and if we can sort of identify those and we create the space that space, this idea of self, it's something that's always there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I immediately saw how this connected to my spiritual journey. I just immediately
Okay.
saw it. I
Yep.
had kind of put the at that time I'd put the spiritual journey in the back burner, not because I wasn't interested, but because I felt stuck. It was like
Hmm.
I can't proceed in the sense that I was taught of like pushing myself to these limits because the
Hmm.
body's telling me no, and I could see so
Hmm.
much gaslighting. There was just so much gaslighting in the spiritual community, and I was like,
Hmm.
I didn't know what gaslighting was at the time, but then I learned the word,
Right.
and I was, oh, that's what they were doing to me, right? And it's like, no, it's all in
Right.
your mind. Don't worry.
Right.
So, like, I
But there's
told
this kind of a striving quality in the spirituality, right? And so again, there can be a process, people might call it spiritual bypass or whatever, but this idea that sort of I'm abandoning myself in this, I'm abandoning parts of myself in the process of this spiritual pursuit, right?
myself,
Yeah.
yeah, I had abandoned a lot of them. I mean, every single mistake that is in the spiritual world, I made them all, right? So I
Mm.
feel like I
Mhm.
learned from them, which is great, but I feel like I made every single mistake, and this isn't like
Mm.
me criticizing myself. I'm amused by it. I think it's funny,
Mm. Hmm.
but yeah,
I mean,
I
at the
made
time,
them.
it's painful, right? At the time, it's
Yeah,
painful and
painful,
disorienting and frustrating, but
frustrating. Yeah.
yeah. Hmm.
But eventually, it's like, well, at least I'm paying attention, so I can learn from them, right?
Mm. So again,
Yeah.
finding a gentleness in the process.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I read that book. I read several others, and eventually, I was like, I want to go back to like psychology in the sense that I had abandoned the possibility of actually being a therapist because I was like,
Hmm.
the only way I know how to be a therapist is what I was taught, which you have to be in your mind. You have to try to analyze what's going on in the other person through your mind so that you can
Hmm.
make intervention and the other person can heal through your
Hmm.
wonderful intervention.
Yeah, you can heal that person. Right.
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 Exactly. And this was completely different. This was like, no, you need to tune in and tap into this energy, which everybody has, so that the other
Right.
person can tap into that energy as well. So you're both doing the
Right.
same thing, really,
Right.
right?
Right.
And what's healing is that energy, that life source, that self, which isn't
Right.
something I'm doing. I'm just allowing for it, right?
Right. Right.
And it's not something that only happens in those 60 minutes. It's actually something that's happening all the time,
Hmm.
everywhere. And we're
Hmm.
just kind of like making space for it to happen in our
Hmm.
session.
Yeah.
So when I
Yeah. And as a,
realized,
I'm sorry, go ahead. I was going to say, as a healer, the IFS perspective is, my job is to sort of connect within that, within myself and create
right,
space so that the other person can do the same, that they can connect with that within themselves and heal themselves. Right. So,
yeah,
me as a
right,
healer, it's not my job to go in and fix, to diagnose, to fix, to do all that stuff. My job is to create a space where they can connect into the truth of who they are. Right. And that
yeah,
truth of who they are then becomes this sort of healing process. They heal themselves. They become their own good parent, their own inner healer. They connect into that. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and um, that I could see immediately that that was like what Dick Schwartz was trying to convey, and I was like, yes, I'm
Hmm.
in, you know.
Hmm.
And then I thought about the possibility of training, right? And at the
Hmm.
time, I had to ask for a scholarship. I didn't have the money for the training, right? Which is like for Argentina standards, it's like wow,
It's an expensive training, $4,000 US at this time, right? So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
14 days. It's intensive, it's long, but it's expensive.
His expense for the state for Argentina is just astronomical. It's just
Yeah.
prohibitive.
Yep.
And I asked for a scholarship. They gave me a partial scholarship. My parents paid for a lot of that, and
Mm.
I got that gift from them. And so I'm very grateful for that. At the time, of course, I was ashamed to ask my parents for that money, and then
Mm-hmm.
self-compassion went there as well.
Mm-hmm. And again, that's
Yeah,
self-compassion, a way to work with shame.
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So eventually I got trained and I realized because people tell me, people are like, yeah, wow, you have a way to, not judge and open space and hold space and allow, for the client to be the way they want to
Mm-hmm.
be. And lots of times I
Mm-hmm.
I hear like this is unlike anything I've ever done.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I'm not trying to say like, oh, that I'm crediting myself for being spectacular. It's more like we just didn't have the permission, even when I trained in college, to make space for that. It's like you had to be, as a therapist, I had to be perfect. I had to be like, know everything. I had to be spot on with interventions. I didn't have to mess
Mm-hmm.
up.
Know the
Now,
DSM, know all the diagnostic criteria, make
yeah,
the right decision, make the right referrals.
yep.
Yeah, you're
Now I
taking the lead in this other person's process. You're the doctor, right?
good doctor, right?
Okay.
And now I have permission to just be myself, hold space for myself first, and hold space for the other person, so we can
Mm.
both do that same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And lots of people, especially here in Argentina, which is this is new in Argentina, IFS and all. So yeah, people are like, "Wow, I've never experienced this before." I'm like, well, I'm glad.
It is. It's very different.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
very different.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I mean that's today, and I want to make another note on trauma, which is like this is something I've asked myself many times, which is I had such a great childhood, right? So what gives? And
Mm-hmm.
what I realized is that, especially for sensitive people, right, and neurodivergent people, it's like
Mm-hmm.
emotional needs and that emotional mirroring is just a basic human need, right? So
Mm-hmm.
even in a great childhood, that might be absent. And
Mm-hmm.
I do realize now that everything I saw about the world when I was a kid was not mirrored back to me in many
Mm-hmm.
ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the spiritual aspect, for instance, right? How life can be a miracle and like why are we here? There has to be a reason, right? Nobody could give me those answers. That wasn't mirrored back to me. In fact, those were weird questions that I shouldn't be asking. And
Mm-hmm.
that was
And
like,
if you did ask, you would feel a sense of distance or disconnection, right? So then we learn to
100%,
keep that to ourselves and we become isolated in our own sensitivity, our own experience, our emotional lives become isolated.
100%.
Yeah.
And that is what leads to trauma because
Yes.
those impulses I had and still have, right? That's energy. That's energy is flowing through my body and that needs to be expressed.
Mm-hmm.
That wants to continue its path into an
Mm-hmm.
expression. But
Mm-hmm.
it was thwarted. It was like cut off because I didn't have that mirroring. In fact, I was shamed for that so
Mm-hmm.
many times, time and time again. It's like, you're weird. You're weird. Not with that weird stuff again, right?
Mm-hmm. Judgment.
Judgment. Yeah. Because
Mm-hmm.
people were scared of it. In fact, like adults were scared of it because that was
Mm-hmm.
like asking questions that they didn't know the answer to.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
insisted, I insisted upon it that it was a big
Mm-hmm.
deal that we should know why we're here and that
Mm-hmm.
we should do things that were beautiful and purposeful.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, no, we just need to live a normal modern life, which is this daily routine and
Mm-hmm.
whatever and commute to
And if
work.
people have cut themselves off from parts of themselves, then they're not receptive to other people bringing those similar parts to them, right? So again, if our parents are sort of cut off from their own sensitivity or their own emotional vulnerability or whatever it is, and we ask as a child very relevant questions. If the adult's not comfortable, then when the child asks that, if I as a child ask that, I'm going to feel a sense of disconnection, maybe shame, right? And so it's like, nope, this is a part of myself that I have to abandon. I have to kind of cut that away. And this is just sort of my own sort of inner space. And then I even lose track, I even lose memory of that even being there in some ways, right? And then, yeah, and then that's sort of the emotional isolation and disconnection. And again, I think that's a piece of what we're talking to with trauma.
Yep.
No, yeah.
And I really do feel that stuck in my body. And
Mm-hmm.
I've been learning to let it flow and express it. And
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, now it's like, there's a different question. It's like, which is, how could one not have trauma if
Mm-hmm.
that wasn't mirrored back? Right.
That's right. Yeah,
So,
how could it be any other way, based on this
Yeah.
experience, the world we live in, and who I am as a person. It was inevitable that I was going to feel this sense of disconnection.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
So now these are the big questions, right? Like how do our like postmodern habits create trauma, like unconsciously or accidentally? Because it's
Hmm.
like how do our modern practices um create that disconnect? And it's like I'm
Hmm.
thinking of school, of course, I'm thinking of school. It's like I just do what you're told, just sit down and follow the rules and
Hmm.
comply, etc. Right? I'm thinking of, yeah, even university. It's like don't
Hmm.
question the underlying assumptions of what you're
Hmm.
taught and how
Hmm.
life is about. And yeah, and if there's that disconnect, that leads to trauma. So now we need like spaces where that energy can flow and we can leave that
hmm
out. Psychotherapy is one of those spaces, but just a very limited one. And I think that we need to make more spaces, just
And
socially.
expand the idea of what psychotherapy might be too.
Also. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. I think
And go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, I think that in our culture, it's like, I mean, not in every culture and in every civilization, there was this thing called psychotherapy, right? It's very new. And I think that in our culture, it exists because we don't have other practices like a big bonfire where we can go dance and express
Yep.
ourselves.
Don't have rites of passage, really.
Rites of passage, right?
Yeah.
And like that, where the emotions are welcome. It's like, blah, I need to
Yeah.
let all this out and
Hmm.
connect parts of myself. Like all these
hmm
ceremonies, we don't have that. So we need to find an hour a week that we need to
hmm
carve out so we can talk to the stranger
hmm
and help. That stranger is going to help us connect to these emotions that we don't even
Yes.
recognize. Right?
Create space for that to come out in a compassionate, holding, like a welcoming sort of way.
Yeah.
Because yeah, again, in the world that we live in, this has been the challenge. So I had a period of life I was pretty disabled, doing very deep work. And then, I was able to reconnect with myself more fully, more wholly, right? And then the question is, how do I enter back into the world, right? And not sort of lose connection with the parts of me that I've sort of reclaimed, right? And sort of move back in. So I went back to school and you have to jump through the hoops and do all this stuff. And it's a challenge to sort of stay connected with myself, stay open-hearted in a world that really sort of rewards and has expectations that I don't do that, right? That I sort of present myself in this way, and here's who I'm supposed to be. This is what I'm supposed to do. And if any part of me doesn't fit into that, there's really not room for that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I hear you. I hear you.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So we've got just a few minutes before we said we were going to be winding up.
Mhm.
So I appreciate you sharing about your journey. So what does integration look like today, sort of in what you're doing, kind of in your continuing sort of emotional and spiritual journey? Like, what does that integration look like today? And the neurodivergent piece?
Mm. Well, right now I am pretty much practicing uh therapy, meaning
Hmm.
it's my main, that's what I do every day.
Focused on yogis, right? Focused on yoga
Yeah, yeah,
folk.
yeah. I'm
Yeah.
opening up to a spiritual aspect. Right now, I have all sorts of clients, but in the future, and I mean next year, as soon as possible, I'm already doing free workshops in Spanish here in Argentina, opening
Mm.
up to yoga teachers and spiritual
Hmm.
practitioners.
Hmm.
I'm also going to be opening up to therapists that are curious about like how I can integrate um the whole outlook and the spiritual philosophy of India
Hmm.
and Vedanta and other practices
Hmm.
into therapy. And that's going to be Spanish. And then maybe next year, and the next year or the other year, is going to be
Hmm.
English. I'm going to focus on English because that's actually my native language. And at the same
Hmm.
time, I haven't lived in the States for so long. So I'm starting where I am right now, starting
Sure.
local, trying to expand, right?
Right.
And so far, so good. People are loving it. We did a workshop with my wife, that's a yoga teacher, last Saturday, and it
Okay.
was one in Spanish.
Great.
And we're gonna be doing more. And I just want to send this message of compassion and
Mm.
what spirituality is all about. And like you asked about integration, I think integration is being like familiarizing myself again with things that I've lost touch with so long ago that were
Hmm.
from the time and that I just disconnected. So
Hmm.
I really see now like mental disorders or what we call symptoms, is simply something that we can't recognize anymore because
Mhm.
it's foreign to us. It's alien. So it's like, oh, it's a bad
Mhm.
thing. No, it's a great thing that if you're
Mhm.
familiar with it, like anxiety, for instance, it has a message for you and it wants to
Mhm.
say. And in the
Mhm.
spiritual tradition, like the tantric tradition, we can call it Shiva and Shakti, right? The energy, which is Shakti, has a message for me, and it
Mhm.
wants to be known, it wants to be seen. If
Mhm.
I can recognize that, then it'll
Mhm.
transform into something beautiful. If I
Mhm.
can't, then it'll stay as something really, scary. And
Mhm.
I think that symptoms are basically that, something that we can't recognize. And that's why
Mhm.
we want to get rid of them. And we think of them as something that is abnormal and something that's not allowing me to live my life.
Mhm.
What if we learned how to recognize them and be like, oh, I know what that is. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
part of me. And it's something
Yes.
very sacred, in fact.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
symptom all of a sudden doesn't isn't something that we need to like label or get rid of. It's something that we
Mhm.
need to love. So that's how I see integration, and that's what I'm trying
Mhm.
to do in my life. I still have lots
Mhm.
of quote unquote symptoms in the sense
Mhm.
that I still experience anxiety. I still
Mhm.
experience lots of difficult emotions and feel
Mhm.
stuck in my body. And it's
Mhm.
now a matter of being like, this is a gift. This
Mhm.
stuck is that energy that's looking to be recognized again.
Mhm.
Because I'm
Yep.
still feeling it as something foreign. So now it's become more of a practice that I mean, I don't want to say I enjoy because sometimes it's very difficult, right?
Yep.
But
Be
I do want
painful,
to
scary.
painful and scary. I do want to say there's meaning in it. There's so much
Mhm.
meaning wasn't there
Mhm.
before. So
Mhm.
that's what inspiration looks like for me. It's a very meaningful,
Mhm.
sacred process that has its
Mhm.
ups and downs, and it feels like so frustrating and ridiculous at times. But at least
Mhm.
like I can find purpose in it now.
Yeah, that purpose. And I really do see internal family systems as embracing that and the idea of the book, no bad parts. There are no bad, if we look at sort of the intention of that part of ourself that's expressing itself in that way, there's a reason for it. There's a meaning to it. And if we learn to listen to it with a sense of openness and curiosity, these 8 C's and IFS, if I can bring that to it, well, then it's not a pathologizing sort of something I need to get rid of. Right? It's just something that I need to learn to listen to and integrate into my life. And recognize there's a whole range of needs maybe that are behind all of that. And if I can learn to listen to the messaging and tend to those needs, right, that's a path of healing.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, wow, I really appreciate your openness, Mariano. I really relate to a lot of your journey. Um, and we'll put some links to the resources that, we're doing our stuff. We'll put that in the description so people go to workshops or other things that might be relevant. But yeah, I continue. I look forward to continuing our journey together and kind of seeing where this goes. And I appreciate your time and energy today.
All right. Yeah. I really enjoyed this. We should do it again sometime.
Yeah, we'll do it again
Good.
sometime. Okay.
Yeah.
All right,
Excellent.
Marty. Well, you take care.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
you got it.